Before we jump into the questions, can you tell
Okay.
people a little bit about the work you do and what led you into supporting families through recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a social worker. I work with families my entire career. I retired a few years ago and I developed my own alcohol use disorder. I'm now almost 13 years sober. I love my 13th birthday is coming up and I like to say that I'm going to be a teenager all over again. I did some damage to my own family. Despite being a social worker and having a background in this field, I still put my family through trauma, their own trauma.
Okay, okay.
When we healed and got to the other side of it, became my passion to help other families not go through what we went through. And it just evolved into speaking and writing and a book and now teaching at, the professional level. So at conferences and workshops, which I just love doing.
Well, I appreciate that. I respect that a lot. And by the way, congratulations being 13 years sober. That's pretty amazing. Recovery language. Like
Mm.
what kind of language actually helps family and loved ones heal during recovery, and what kind of words often unintentionally like create shame, pressure, or distance?
Yeah, great question. And before we get in, if there's one thing I want people to hear today is that those of us in recovery, whether you're recovering from trauma, health injuries, we need your support, not your criticism. No, for me, especially early in recovery, I was very sensitive to what everyone said to me. So sometimes I misheard what people said. Does that make sense? And like I said a
Yeah.
minute ago, sometimes I speak before I think it through. So I always encourage people to pause because I
Okay.
know family members are coming from, well-meaning intention. But if you say things like, I noticed, I appreciate, I'm curious, or what could I do to help you? Those are things that essentially are helpful. But if you say things like, you should be past this, or I notice you've fallen back. It looks like you're
Mm,
sliding back into your old habits, or I hope this works this time. Those are
mm.
little digs, which you may not see it that way, but we will. Yeah. So I think it's really important, and how we share with our family members. And think about it this way. Whenever I don't know a whole lot about brain injury, but I do understand a little bit about the dynamics of addiction and the process the brain follows an addiction. That essentially, whenever we're stressed or put in a difficult situation, my frontal lobe, the part of my brain that is responsible for logic, reasoning, judgment, decision making, kind of slows down and shuts down. So if you say something that I feel threatened about, I'm going to go into survival mode, saying that in a very general way. And I'm not going to be able to hear your good intent.
Mm.
So that's just something for family members to keep in mind too. It's not necessarily a process where I'm accepting or not accepting. It's what my instinctual impulse is to protect me and to put my guard up.
Many families experience boundaries as rejection. And can you talk about why healthy are actually probably one of the strongest ways to support recovery and rebuild trust?
Yeah, actually, I think that boundaries, well, the best example I can use is I usually compare boundaries as a roadmap when I'm talking to groups, especially like in recovery residences, because if you, let's take for instance, I live in South Alabama. Let's say I'm going to drive to Tampa, Florida. I could do it without a roadmap. Probably not very well. I might get lost. I might take a few wrong turns. I might stress myself out. But I could get there just by getting on Interstate 10 and driving east and then following the signs down to Tampa. But that's not
Mm.
very efficient, right? And
Right.
it's probably going to be frustrating for me. If I have a map, which is like boundaries in a family, I have directions, a guideline, and I will get to my destination quicker and less stress. And that's what, boundaries don't push people away. They actually pull people together because it gives you an idea of what, I hate to use the word expectations, but it gives you an idea of what people are hoping for or what they want or need. I mean, it's also another way to say, this is what I need from this relationship or from this situation. And if you think about it, we all have boundaries. We have boundaries about our jobs, about, I got to pay my bills. I got to drive the speed limit for the most part, things like that. So boundaries are just guidelines. If you were going to ask something about trust, right? So that
Yes.
trust is really tied into boundaries, because then let's say, obviously in addiction or substance use disorder, lack
Mhm.
of trust is huge. It's huge. It just is beat down in families. And I always say the best way to build back trust is to communicate well and to show up consistently and to talk about your plans. So it's consistent behavior, actions over time. It's not making those promises. It's not, especially don't make promises you can't keep. It's
Yeah. Mhm.
small little steps and actions over time.
Like, what do you think families often misunderstand about how long recovery really takes, and why comparing someone to a timeline or to others can quietly undermine healing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, first of all, everyone's timeline is different, right? I'm sure you've
Mhm.
seen that because of the group that you're involved in. And
Mhm.
I've certainly seen it from the recovery point of view. And sometimes people slide back and have setbacks. Let's call them setbacks as opposed to relapses. So I think what families need to understand is that when you compare us to other people, to timelines or other people, it just adds more pressure, right? And more
Mhm.
pressure puts us back into that survival mode. And it's hard for us to respond with good judgment, reason, decision making, to express ourselves well. So comparison is destructive. And
Mhm.
I think that comes from a good place in family members, maybe from my point of view. I have to understand that my family members holding hope that I'm going to continue to get better. Again, pause, think about how you present yourself to your loved one in recovery. Don't make assumptions, slow down, be grateful for the progress. Probably it's better to look back. I do that in my recovery. I don't know if you do that in yours. Well, I look back from where I came. Yeah, let's say 2 months of recovery, I would
Mhm.
hear people say, "Ugh, your brain is still foggy. You're still not thinking clearly." And I could intellectually absorb that and but not really understand what it meant. But at 2 years of sobriety, I can look back and go, yeah, that was foggy. I made some bad decisions that one year. I had
Mhm.
good intentions back there. And that's another thing for families to know. We might have good intentions, but our follow through might still be weak. And not because
Mhm.
of our own fault, but because our brain is rehealing.
How can loved ones hold hope for someone without turning that hope into expectations or pressure, so people can heal in their own rhythm instead of feeling pushed to perform?
Well, okay, this just popped into my head. One of the things that I think is important is that family members have their own support group and share
Mhm.
so that they can share those feelings of hope, excitement, fear with other family members and not with us. But you're right, hope that's attached to pressure or expectations, it that's more destructive than constructive. Hope should be attached. Well, hope, here's this, we're going to struggle, right? So,
Mhm.
if you're going to share your thoughts and feelings and hopes about your family members' hope for the future of their loved one, make sure that you leave room and acknowledge there's going to be struggle on that other person's part, that it may not always be easy. So, a better statement might be something like, I believe change is possible, or I trust in this process, or I accept where you're at. What would you have liked to hear early on in your recovery when a family member, what were things that you would have liked to hear? I'm curious.
Honestly, my family is, they helped me a lot. They pushed me and supported me, pushed me, and they pushed me in the sense of not telling me what to do. That we're always going to be here for you. We're always behind you, on your shoulders, and right behind you if I ever need anything help. Not it's just one step at a time. There's no rush. There's no pressure. It's like we're
Hmm.
always be here regardless. And just having that hope and that love behind me helped me unconsciously keep moving forward, knowing that I have support. And probably the best things when, or probably the best, were not words necessarily. From my perspective, from my lens, not necessarily the words, but the actions behind their words to show that their words had valid reason behind it.
I think
That's
that's true from my point of view too. And when I'm trying going back to trust, it's that your actions build that trust, that they reinforce the hope and they help. Because, okay, this is totally ad lib, just off the cuff of my head. You know, the opposite of hope is fear, isn't it? In a way,
you say that. You say that.
if family members maybe address their own fears with their own peers, that didn't mean to rhyme, but their own fears, then their hope can come across as more genuine and authentic and be more what we need to hear, you know. Just a
So
thought.
yeah, that's a good thought. Interesting thought. After a brain injury, including a stroke,
Mm-hmm.
the brain becomes more vulnerable, more sensitive. And for people who struggled with addiction before, relapse risk can be much higher, especially once they're discharged from rehabilitation, if they're lucky to go to. So, from your experience, would you wish families understood about how addiction and neurological recovery affect each other?
Well, addiction really is a neurological, I don't know, how to say illness, but there's neurological damage with addiction as well, because when you've used a substance over time, you've essentially trained your brain to depend on that substance for any feelings, for feeling normal. You know, when we first start
Okay.
using or drinking, we do that to either escape pain or to search towards fun. But that brain wants to adapt and adjust. And so the more you use, tolerance develops, and the more it takes to get that feeling, whether it's relief or excitement. And the brain adapts, right? So two things happen. Over time, the person in recovery gets to a point where they use just to feel normal. It's no longer about chasing pleasure or getting relief. And I love for family members to realize that, because a lot of times I hear things like, well, I just don't understand. You know, I don't understand why they can't cut back from a case of beer to a six pack of beer every night. And it's not
Mhm.
because they can't, it's because their brain is programmed that, if we want to get technical, it's the primitive brain, the reward center, who's going more, 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 more. And that is louder than the prefrontal cortex, which is going, whoa, Jackie, this is not good for your health. This is, there goes my dog. This is not a healthy thing. So it is, it's a neurological problem. And then what I kind of mentioned earlier, we both talked about when you incite stress, which
Mhm.
can be physical injury, job stress, social stress, challenges that pop up, because, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. You know,
Okay.
that also pushes us back into that primitive mode. And think about this. Well, I'll just share my experience. So I went to treatment. I tried to get sober on my own through 12-step programs and made progress, but I needed more. And when I went to treatment towards the end, they're like, we think you should go to a recovery house because we're not sure you can maintain your sobriety. And that was for a number of reasons. But the thing that it offered for me was that continued structure, because when you're in treatment or when you're in an intensive outpatient program, you have a lot of structure and there's safety in that. And and typically you don't encounter, or if you do encounter something like a divorce, illness of a family member, a job loss, you've got people around you. But when you're on the outside, when you're no longer in that really structured environment, you have new stressors. You're vulnerable.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And family members need to realize this. And again, it goes back to that our brain is still programmed to operate the other way. I am no longer able to get happy by or achieve the same level of happiness like by seeing my grandchild run across the yard chasing bubbles. You know what I mean? That's not going to bring me the
Yeah.
same level of happiness. So when I hear that she has fallen and broken her leg, I'm probably going to overreact to that. I'm not going to have the same level of reasoning that someone else would. Like, so
Yes.
my
Yes.
thinking process is still slowed down. So I would want, was the question, what would I want family members to know? I want them to know, I wrote a little note here, that
Okay.
brain injury and addiction disrupts impulse control, emotional regulation, and stress tolerance. So when we
Okay.
encounter those things with not a structured environment, we're more vulnerable to relapse. And it takes time. It really does. I mean, I've heard, and this is just in relative to addiction recovery, that it takes up to 2 years for dopamine to be able to start being produced naturally in the same kind of quantities pre-addiction, you know? So it's going to take some time. We are more vulnerable and more likely to create our distressors. And keep in mind, those first couple of years or first couple of months for someone with a substance use disorder, our brain is still programmed. Let's say we get stressed. Let's say I get called into, I like this example. You get a little message from your boss that says, hey, I want to talk with you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. For me, I'm going to stress from that moment till 8 a.m. So early in recovery, that is going to trigger me to drink because my brain is still programmed to say, you need relief. And the quickest way to get relief is a drink.
Okay.
After, now that I have many years of recovery, thank goodness, my response is not that. My response typically is, let me fall back on my tools. Let me call my sponsor. Let me call a friend, or to text them back and go, wait, is this going to be a good thing or a bad thing? You know what I mean? So now
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can think clearly. But that also
Okay.
reminded me of something is that I think people need to know, and you said it too, like there's times that you get triggered. And, even though I'm this many years sober, I still have moments that trigger me. And I'll tell another little story. So I love my family of origin, but they were
Okay.
stressors. And my way for coping with some of the stress there when I would visit my parents was to go up into my room and be like, oh, me and the kids are going to go read some books. And I would go to my room and drink, you know? So I remember one of the first times I went home, and I didn't go home for a good solid like year and a half to my mom's home because I knew it would trigger me. There's some dynamics there that we had to work through. But one of the first times, and I don't remember how long I was sober, I remember thinking, this is why I drank when I was here, and thinking a quick relief would be to go up and hide in that room and have a drink, and
Mhm.
occasionally those thoughts still come up, a stressful event at Christmas. And that's all normal and okay. You know what I mean? I don't want family members to freak out. Okay, here's another quick story. Sorry, I'm full of stories. This summer, I took a cruise with my family members. And on
Mhm.
one day on the open seas, the boat was really rocky. And I commented and literally everyone on the boat was swaying back and forth as we
Oh
walked down
gosh.
the aisle. It was funny. And I go, Matthew, I said this to my middle son. Oh my God, I feel drunk from this swaying. And and he looked at me, he's like, you don't want to drink, do you? And I went, no, but I feel it. This is what that feeling of being intoxicated, not being able to walk
Okay.
straight was like. But you know what? That night, I had a drinking dream, a dream where I
Mm.
drank and felt guilty and ashamed. And because that was triggered, my brain was triggered by that event, by feeling that thing. And luckily, they had 12-step meetings on the boat. And I have really open communication, which is key with family members. And I told on myself the next day, poor Matthew, because I tell him everything. And I was like, I had a drinking dream last night, which probably fueled his fear. But I reassured him that I was going to make it through without drinking. But so,
It-
well, I think that's important to point out too, that there is an established a gene that's associated with alcohol misuse.
uh,
And I know it's on both sides of my family too. And it doesn't relieve me of my responsibility, but I do, preach to my kids. You probably have this gene. You have to be more careful, and be more aware of your drinking.
well, Janice, I really appreciate you. I really respect what you're doing for your family, for yourself, and for those with addiction. And because they are addictions everywhere, regardless what traumas and every spectrum and
Mm.
of human life. And thank you again for this. And
Yeah, I'm very happy to do this. And thank you for what you do too. It's so admirable, and I think both of us are taking
Mhm.
trauma, a tough situation, and turning it into something good. If there's
Yes.
one thing I want to say to families before we go, can I preach just a second?
Please do.
What do I wish families understood or knew? I wish that they knew that the best way to support us is to encourage us to engage in healthy activities, which sometimes includes rest, relaxation, and play. Play is a great way to not only build your brain health, but also to build
Hmm.
relationships. When families play together, couples play together, parents and their children, they have fun, and it generates that positive dopamine and positive feelings and just helping build a stronger foundation. So I would love for family members to be patient with us, to encourage us to take care of ourselves and to not set expectations. I think it's also important that we offer ourselves compassion as well. I
Oh
know
yes.
early on in my recovery, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think it's important we offer ourselves compassion, take time to look back and go, God, I've come a long way since those bad decisions I made at 1 year sober. I have a
Yeah,
friend,
no.
her name's Katie Van Orden Deassis, and she's a life coach. And this is a simple lesson, but I live with it weekly, if not daily, where she'll say, she's taught me to set goals so reasonable that it's almost impossible not to achieve.
Yeah, yeah.
And those
They,
little successes build on each other. And
they,
I need that. I respond really well to constructive criticism and praise more so
mhm.
than destructive criticism.
Anyway, Janice, thank you very much for doing this.
I've enjoyed it. I'm so glad that we met and talked, and I really, truly admire the work you do, and hope that I haven't said anything that's not politically correct. But if I did, to
Uh,
anyone's listening, I apologize. I'm really coming with good intent.
oh
So
no.
I'm not good at asking for help. So I learned a lot of this stuff the hard way. And I don't want other people to have to learn it the hard way. So